How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. So recently I saw this video on my Instagram, and yeah, there's just a load of different techniques that go into something like this, and I thought it would be a nice little video to break down for you guys.
The way people look at you says more than just their attention, but in the end, their looks won't matter. Only your results will.
We're going to be going through the whole process here, so getting the voiceover, making our style frames in Photoshop, bringing it all into After Effects, animating it, and yeah, basically show you the whole process. If that's something that you're interested in, stick around and let's jump into it. So before we go in, this is the video that we're going to be making.
The way people watch your swing says more than just their interest. But in the end, their eyes don't matter. Only your scorecard does.
So yeah, let's just hop into our computer and let's just jump into it. So first thing we're going to do is just come over to 11 Labs here, and this is the script that I'm going to be using for today. Here is the voiceover, and basically I've just put in a few different spaces just so the VO kind of extends a bit and there's more pauses and stuff on the parts that we want. So
the way people watch your swing says more than just their interest. But in the end, their eyes don't matter. Only your scorecard does.
Right, so super similar to that reference video, but yeah, that's how I've got the VO for this. I think 11 Labs is fully free. You have like 6,000 credits per day, but you'd be very surprised to run through all that. So get your VO from there, make your script, and then you're going to need to get some reference photos. So these are the photos that I'm going to be using for this tutorial. As always, all the project files and stuff will be on my Patreon if you want to just use these images. Once you have your reference images, let's jump into Photoshop. Let's just make our style frames. So what we're going to do is get a 916 and we're going to enable our artboards, and we can call this golf video tutorial, right? Create that. We can just call this scene 1, extend this to the right maybe 4 more times, and let's just name all these now so we have them all. So scene 2. Right, so let's just bring in a rectangle and just give this as our background layer. I'm going to be using this gray here, and now we can just drag and drop in some of these images. So for the first image, I'm going to use this bloke here. Let's just position that roughly where we think it's going to be. So for this, I'm just going to go super rough along the outside. I think it kind of adds to the effect as well. So I'm going to have a lot of hard edges in, and I'm just using the pen tool going around really rough. Great. So now we can just right click, make selection, and press L, and we're going to just make a new selection via copy. We can just delete that bottom there, and now we can just cut out these other sections here. So right click, make selection, and we can just delete that. And now what we're going to do is just cut out his arms and these binoculars here, right? So let's just come in and do that. Right, so we have our binoculars and his arms cut out, so we can just name these as arms and person. Right, now we're just going to give this a bit of treatment. So all we're going to do is just come up to adjustments, give it a black and white, and we can just play around with how we want this looking. So I'm going to make it a bit darker, and then this is all just down to preference. So we have that, and then let's just do the exact same for the hands here. Right, I think that's looking good. And then all I'm going to do is just come up to filter, noise, and we're going to add in some noise. Something like that. And we can just come up to filter, add noise to the person as well. Great. Now we're going to want to fill in these gaps here that we are missing. So with our lasso tool, we can just come in and just get that section. And let's just press generate a fill. Right, so that's given us just a random face, but it'll do the job. We can just come down and we're just going to merge our person and that generate a fill there. Let's call this person again. Yeah, now we can animate this up so it kind of looks a bit more realistic. Great. So what we're going to do now is just bring in another shape, and I'm going to just do something like this. And this is just going to be reference. We can recreate this in After Effects. So let's just bring that in and give it a darker gray color like that, and bring this down to underneath the person and the arms. Because we use that generated fill, you can see that there's still a bit here that just needs to be cut out. So let's just cut this out, make selection, delete, and then we just need to do it down here. Grand. So now we have that basically all done. Now let's just add in the text that we're going to have here as well. So let's just come over, bring in some text, and I'm going to come back to my script here, paste this in. Just going to come over to my properties here, and I'm going to just make this regular, and I'm going to just reduce that spacing a tiny bit like that, and just place this anywhere. We can readjust this in After Effects. This is just to get it in, and I think I'm just going to make this all lowercase. Alt drag on this, and let's just type in watch. Let's make this bold and italic. We can just scale this up a good bit. Great. We can just maybe increase it a tiny bit more. We're just going to add in the last bit here, and it's going to be edit this. I'm just going to put in your swing and then position that somewhere like that. We can maybe just increase the space in here a bit, the kerning. Right, so something like that is looking good. What we can do is just come over to our layers, select all of these text layers, put them in a group, and let's just call this text scene 1. Drag that to the top. We have our person here, we can just group that. And yeah, that's basically scene 1 done. Happy days. Right, let's move on to scene number 2 here. What I'm going to do is just drag this background over. What we're going to do here now is just add in some text, and all I'm going to do is basically get that text that we've just created, and we can just Control J on it, bring it up to our scene 2 here, and now we can just edit this a bit. So this is going to be says more than just there, and I'm just going to space this out a bit more, increase the kerning, yeah, and we can make this a bit bigger. And then I'm just going to delete this bottom layer. I'm going to make this another bold layer like this. Great. Now we can just select that text, Control T, and just position that somewhere where we want it. Cool. So now let's just drag in that next image that we're going to use, and it's going to be this Bubba Watson image here, and just scale it something like that. What I'm going to do is kind of cut him out and then cut all the people out around them. And yeah, I'll fast forward through this because I don't think you need to see it, but you kind of get the gist. So right, that was pretty time consuming, but we got there, and we just right click, select that, and then we're going to do a new layer via copy. Can delete this background layer now, and now we just have to cut out Bubba Watson here. Right click, make selection, new layer via cut. We can just hide him. Now what we can do is just, let's use some generated fill just to kind of fill in some of these areas here that kind of will be affected. So let's come up here and let's see how that's going to do. Right, that's going to work fine, because basically when he's in here just means that we can kind of play around with that now. So let's just merge those 2 layers, and let's just call this crowd and Bubba. Right, so now we have Bubba on one layer, we have the crowd on another layer. What we can do now is just take this rectangle, and we're going to just use this as a placeholder as well. We can drag it over, and let's just resize this. Right, something like that's looking good. Now I'm just going to add in some subtle shading underneath his feet here. I'm just going to come here and maybe just do 2 little rectangles. We can just adjust this a bit like this, and let's just drag it underneath, and so we can see what's going on here. Grand. And what we're going to do for that is just come over to our filter, blur, and we're going to add in a Gaussian blur. And we can just do something like that. Come over here, opacity, and let's just bring it down a tiny bit. Right, and now let's just duplicate that. Press Ctrl J and just move this over to his other foot. Right, so just subtle little details like that. And what we're going to do is select Bubba Watson here, Ctrl J on him, just to make this a bit easier. On this layer, we're just going to come over, double click it, and we're just going to give it a color overlay. Make the color black, and now we can basically just rearrange them, something like that. Just try to match his perspective here. You can drag this underneath Bubba Watson here, and we can just click that layer, come up to filter, and then we're just going to add that Gaussian blur again, and then we can just reduce the opacity a lot as well. Something like that is looking pretty good. So now we have scene 2 done, and last, I don't think we're going to need a scene 4. We'll just keep it in for the time being. But scene 3, let's just get that background again, and let's just bring in this image of the golf hole. We're just going to rotate that so it's something like this. And I'm just going to come up here and we can just do a rough cut of this circle here. Grand. Right click, new layer via copy. We can just delete this one. Now we can kind of come in and fine tune this a bit. So I'm just going to come around pretty rough, and I want to keep some of this edge in as well. So one thing I just forgot to do, we weren't done with this Bubba Watson photo. Let's just come up and do the same treatment that we did for that first photo. So adjustments, black and white, and we can just adjust this how we want it. And then for him, I'm just going to maybe give him a curves, give him a bit of a S curve here just to make him pop out a bit more. And we can just add in that noise to both of these layers. And I'm just going to hide that bubble for 1 second, and I can just come on in here and I'm just going to delete that part of that generated fill that has given us that white background here. So that is scene 2 done. And then back over here, we can just now come over and let's just give this the same treatment, adjustments, black and white, something like that. And I'm just going to do an outline around this golf ball. And I'm just going to generate a fill this. So we just want to get rid of that. Right, that's looking good. We can just merge these, all this hole. And what we can do is just come here and we're just going to select these little rough outlines of this grass here. We can be pretty rough with them. And you'll see why we do this a bit later when we're animating it. But let's just come in and around and just get these here. New layer via, sorry, make selection. New layer via copy. And then we can just hold Alt and rearrange this maybe somewhere over here. We can just adjust it a bit. We can just select that and then Control L just to bring up our levels here. And let's just try to match that a bit like that, make it a bit darker. And we can come over to our eraser tool. Just increase the size a tiny bit and make the hardness 0. And then we can just kind of blend this in a bit. Now we have something like that. And all we're going to do then is just come up, make a new layer and just put it underneath our hole. And over here, we're just going to get our brush. And I'm just going to use this brush here and maybe just do some like rough little outlines here. We can leave that like that, and we can just call this hole, and these are going to be rough grass and then rough grass. We can just select both of these and put them in a group and just call it top grass. We can just merge these 2 layers here. We don't really need to worry about them. And that is scene 3 there. So I think the last thing we're going to do is just going to basically be more text. We can just come down here to this group text, hold Alt, drag it up, bring it to the top. And in here, we can just put in more text. So our text is going to be something like that. In our properties, I'm just going to make this regular, bring it down a good bit, right? And that's going to be our text for that. And the last thing we're going to do is just copy this background one more time over onto scene 4. And we can just get this text, bring it up to scene 4, Control T, and let's just bring it down into the center. Let's just bring in that last bit of text. Just delete these other loose strands here. Don't need this text. Let's just come over to our properties. Let's reduce the height on it. And we can just select this, bring it down a good bit. And then I'm just going to adjust that height again. Something like that. Make this a lot smaller and just make this regular. And yeah, just adjust it like that. We basically have everything done here. All we're going to do, I've just forgotten to add that noise to this these layers here, so let's just do that. Come up, filter, add noise, and we can just do that for the others as well. Great. So they are our 4 scenes here that we're going to be animating now. The animation is going to take a bit as well, but anyway, this is the best way to kind of lay out your scene before you jump into After Effects, and kind of gives you a clear insight of what you're going to be making. So what we're going to do is just come and select all of these layers, come over to File, Export, and we're going to export artboards to files. Make sure that it's a PSD here, and then just save it somewhere. Right, so that's done its thing, and now I've opened up After Effects, and we're going to just make a new composition, and we can call this main comp. Yeah, 10 seconds is enough. And what we can do now is just put this into our comp here, and in our assets in our PSD folder, we can just bring all these in one by one. So right, we have all of our layers in here, and we can just get these other files and then just drop them into our solids. Forget about them. Right, so we have scene 1 here. Let's just drag and drop this in. and everything has came in. So we're just going to double click on this and our scene 1. We're just going to uncomp it here, and back here we can just uncomp it as well. Leave our background, because our background's going to stay the same throughout, so we can just drag everything else down to how long we want this scene. And first thing I'm going to do is just right click, new. I'm going to add in an adjustment layer. We can call this frame rate. Let's just make it 15. I'm going to just come up here, get a rectangle, and I'm just going to make a new rectangle here. This is going to be, as I said earlier, that other one was just a placeholder, so we can just bring this here, just give it the same color. Great. And then we can just delete that rectangle and just reposition this. Let's start animating this rectangle. So we can just hide our person and our text for now, and we're just going to hold Control Alt and Home just to center that. Come over or press Y and just bring this down to the bottom right corner here. So we can just come over to the shape layer, rectangle path. We're going to right click, convert to a Bezier path, give it a keyframe, and let's just move this on a bit. And then we can just press V and let's just bring this down. So that's just going up like that. And then let's just give it some easing. Nice. And then what we can do is just give it a scale keyframe. And then here we're just going to scale it down to 0. Give it that same easing. And we get something like that. Last thing I'm going to do is just give it a position keyframe. Right click. And then here we're just going to bring it over to the left a bit. And let's give it that same easing. Maybe just drag this out a bit. Like that. And now we can enable our person and we can just see what's going on. Lovely. Right, so what we can do is link this person to our shape layer. So it's going to come up like that. And in here, I'm just going to come up here, and now we can give our arms a position keyframe. Maybe here. And then I'm going to just drag these down a bit. So he's lifting the binoculars up. And then we're just going to hold Alt, click it, and then just give this a wiggle on the position. Maybe like a 3 and a 5. And yeah, so he's just looking around like that. Let's come back and see how that's looking. Brilliant. Last thing we're going to do is just come to our person and make it a matte of that layer behind it. And then enable that matte. So then he comes up and he's inside of that box. Brilliant. So we can extend this out a bit, and what I'm going to do is just drag and drop in this VO just so I can kind of get a good sense of the timing. So I'm just going to mute that just so it's not annoying. Enable our text here. Right, so we can just uncomp that and then select all these layers, right click, and let's just convert them to editable text. And we can just delete this null here, and what I'm going to do is just select all these layers and then just give it a new null and just scale this up a bit. Perfect. And now we can just start animating these in. So this is going to be the first thing that comes in, and all I'm going to do is just give it a position keyframe, then at the start position on the left and give it some slow easing. Come to opacity and we're just going to fade it in like this. You can just do the same now for the other 2 layers. Let's just go position on both of them. T for opacity, and then press U so we can see everything. And we're just going to come back and make these somewhere around here. And then we can just give these all that same easing. I'm just going to have this come in a bit slower. And we can just drag all these out to here. Right, that's looking really good. So now we need to transition into our next scene, right? So to do that, all we're going to do is just come here and we can just select all of these layers, and let's just give this a comp and just call this scene 01. And maybe let's just leave it here. Let's just give it a yellow color so we know that any of the yellow colors are our scenes. Right, so just going to turn back on the VO just to get the timing of this transition. What I'm going to do now is just bring in our scene 2, and let's just drag this down a bit like that. And this is when this is going to come in here. Come in, same thing, we're just going to uncomp this here, and then we're going to come back to our main comp and then uncomp it again. we're going to select Bubba and then all those shadow layers. I'm just going to pre-count this and just call this Bubba master. We can hide that for now, and we can also hide that crowd and that rectangle, right? So we want this text to be a bit more in the center initially. So let's just position that somewhere like that. And we're just going to uncomp all this now. We can just right click these, create editable text. So we can just delete this rectangle, which is that background. And what we're going to do now is just comp this together, and it's going to be seam 2. Select both of these layers. I'm just going to give it a null, and now we can just give this a position keyframe, and now we're going to just bring this down like this. And for our scene 2, we can just position this to exactly where we want it. So then something like this is happening. And we're just going to ease this and give it a nice fast transition here. And just adjust the duration of that. Right, so what we can do is just add in a wiggle to this position. Give it like a 2 and a 3. And it kind of just gives it a bit of camera shake. Now we can hop back into this scene 2. And let's just bring back in some of these other elements, right? So, bang. And then all this text is going to scale up. So we can just give this text here a position keyframe, slide it up like that, and maybe give it another keyframe like that. Let's just see how that's looking. We're just going to give this a scale as well. So it's going to go from what it was to something like this. And we can right click, new, adjustment layer, bring this just over the text. And we call this blur, and let's just give this a fastbox blur. Set a keyframe at 0, and then on that zoom at its highest point, maybe give it something like this, and then let's come back down to 0, just so it has like a bit of a focus pull. Let's see how that's looking. And now we need to animate this photo in, right? So let's come down to our rectangle and our crowd and our Bubba. And on our rectangle here, we can just come down to the mask. Let's just give this a keyframe here. Select that top layer, that mask, and let's just do something similar. Bring this over like that. I'll make this mask a different color just so you can see what's going on. Drag that out a bit and let's just give it some easing. Right, so what we can do now is select that crowd and make that a track matte of that layer below. Right, so we can just actually bring this up a bit just so these heads are coming through. And I can just see some of this white coming through here. So let's just do a quick little mask just to get rid of that. We can just come down and invert that. So something like that's happening now. And now we just need to animate Bubba on. Let's just select this rectangle and our crowd here and just bring down the position a bit just so the composition is looking a tiny bit better. So let's see how everything is looking now. So we can just come back into our scene 2, and now we have to try to get Bubba in here in a nice way. So we could probably just do a scale on here, which will look good with that dropped frame rate. So we can just select Bubba and let's just bring this anchor point to somewhere like this, scale, and let's just bring this down to 0 and give it some keyframes like that. Let's see how that's looking with the drop frame rate and stuff. Brilliant. Right, what we can do as well, which might be a nice little detail, we can just come here when Bubba comes in. Let's just click this, and on this Bubba main layer, let's just select the puppet tool. Let's just give them a few points here. The main thing I'm going to be focusing on is this golf club. So something here and then at the top. And then press U and just select all these keyframes, bring it back a tiny bit, and then drag it out a bit, and we can just press V, select that top point here, and maybe, and that's going to be going so slow that it'll just add a nice little subtle detail to. Right, that's looking pretty good. Now we're going to just jump into scene 3 and let's just drag and drop that in here. Let's just readjust the length of it and bring it to somewhere like this. We're just going to come in here and we're going to just do the same thing. We're going to just uncomp this layer, and I can just get rid of these for now, and we can uncomp this again. Right click, put them all back into a composition just so it's easier to manage. And let's just give this that yellow color. And now we're working on scene 3, right? So what we can do is just come back in and delete that background so we can see what we're working with here. And we can just link this to that null again. Let's give this another position keyframe. And we're going to be dragging down somewhere there. And we can just then reposition this comp to where we want it. We can just hide that initial comp as well. Right, so that's looking really good like that. And now we're going to add in a little golf ball rolling into this hole. Yeah, let's just jump into that. So what I'm going to do, just so we can see what we're working with, I'm just going to copy that background layer and bring it in here and just leave it at the bottom. Let's start animating this golf ball. So I'm going to just get a Eclipse tool and let's just drag this out, something like that. Control Alt and Home, that's just going to center that anchor point, right? So let's just add in some animation here. So we're going to just have the ball animate. We can just call it ball, give it a position keyframe at the start. Then it's just going to roll down here. And once it hits over this lip, it's going to scale down. So let's just add in our scale keyframe. And it's going to scale down. Well, to hit here, let's just get that pen tool. And we can just adjust this hit here. I'm just going to increase the composition length here. So maybe something like 5 seconds, just so we have a bit of time to work with. And we can just drag all these out. We're going to have it hit this other side. And then it's going to rest in the middle. And then a tiny bit further like that. So let's see how that's looking. Right, so super rough, but we can clean all that up in a second, right? So what we can do first is just maybe give this a white color, which would make more sense. We can just come and right click on here, layer styles, and let's just do a drop shadow. In our drop shadow settings, we can just spread this out a tiny bit, increase that distance and that angle, lower that opacity a tiny bit like that. Right, that's already looking so much better. Just to make this feel a bit more 3D and give it a bit more depth, we're just going to come layer styles and we're going to do a inner shadow. And we're just going to give this inner shadow, we can just change the direction here so it's on the other side. Right, that's looking good. The last thing is when this ball falls into the hole, that shadow needs to basically take over the whole ball. So what we can do is just give this distance and our size a keyframe, and then here it's gonna basically be dark like that. Also, that drop shadow is going to change as well, so we can just do our angle and our distance, give them a keyframe, and we can maybe move on a bit, and we can just drop that so it's just a bit closer to the ball, and that would make more sense. And let's just drag this last keyframe out. Now we just need to smooth this animation up a tiny bit. In order to do that, we can just get our pen tool and kind of just adjust these a bit, just so it makes it a bit smoother. And yeah, just give it a bit more of a curve like that. And let's just see how that's looking. Nice. And we can just ease this last bit here, just give it something like that. And then at the end, we can just have this back into the middle. And we can just give all these that same keyframe. Right, so let's see how that is looking. Last thing I'm going to do is just come up and we're going to drag and drop in that golf ball texture. We can just come over here and link it to that golf ball. So then we're getting something like that. And we're just going to make this a track math of that golf ball. We're going to just enable that ball as well. And we're just going to do that Luma matte selected. We can just scale this down a good bit. And we can just come and put in a repeat tile on it. Drag it out just so it's hitting all the edges here. And last thing we're going to do is just on that texture, just give it some rotation like that. So then when the ball starts, let's just make this fit. It's going to look something like this. Great. Let's see how that's looking now with the drop frame rate. Right, that's looking really good. What we can do just to add in some little touches here, we're going to just, on this text here, do the exact same thing as we've done before. So select all this, give it a position keyframe, and we'll give it a opacity keyframe, press U, and then we can just drag these a bit to the left, bring down the opacity, and then we're just going to stagger these a bit. And then let's give this some sort of ease in here. We just select all these, right click, and then just maybe make them editable. And let's see how this is looking. Great. Now what we can do is just give this another position keyframe. We're going to move on to our final scene. Maybe let's just move this over to the left this time. And we're just going to have to increase our composition length a bit. So let's make this 12 seconds. Drag out this background. And let's just give this that yellow color. We can come back in and delete this background here. So everything, I think just to start this off, let's just maybe have the scale of the ball go from 100 and start off at 0. Now onto this top grass bit, right? So we want this to be active on the bottom layer like that. And all we're going to do is just press Ctrl Shift and D and split that. And we're just going to drag this up to the top at this point here. So then it's very subtle, but the ball goes underneath the grass. We're just going to bring in this last bit of text here. And we can just link this now. Parent this to that null. And let's just put this in our position that we want. We can just align it to the center. Let's just uncomp this and uncomp this text. Right click it, create, convert to editable text. And I'm just going to do a typewriter. Let's just put it on that. Press U on it. And then just in our advanced settings here, I'm just going to increase the smoothness to 100% and characters to words. And let's see how that's looking. Right, it just needs to be a tiny bit quicker just to match that VO. Once you're happy with how all that text is looking, now we're just going to transition this off and then we're going to have a perfect loop. So what we can do is come up to this null. Let's give this a position keyframe. And just at the end here, we're going to have this drag all the way up off screen. You can just come over and just give this some easing. And let's just see how everything is looking. Right, so that's looping perfectly, and yeah, everything is looking really nice. Let's just add in the last few little touches just to make this all come together, right? So first thing we're going to do, we can just press Ctrl A and press U just to collapse everything. We're just going to right click and we're going to go new, and we're going to just make a new adjustment layer. Let's just bring this underneath that frame rate, and on here we can just call this halftone. Let's just skip into somewhere where we can see what's going on. And all I'm going to do is bring in a CC ball action. I'm going to bring down the grid spacing and the ball size. And we can change the shading as well. But yeah, leave that up to you. And now what we're going to do is bring in a fill. We're going to make this white. And then we're going to bring in a solid composite. Make this black. And then we can bring in a CC composite. And we're going to make this transfer mode to hard mix. Great. So what we can do now is just come over to our halftone texture and let's just change this to hard mix as well. And we're just going to bring down this opacity a good bit. just so it gives it that bit of texture like that. And that's looking really good. Now all we're going to do is just right click, make a new adjustment there, bring it underneath that frame rate, and let's call this blur. We can just come up and get a camera lens blur, bring it onto this, and let's just bring this down to 0. We're going to set a keyframe and then press U just to see what we're doing. Increase this a good bit, and then we can just copy that first keyframe. So then that's just giving a subtle little blur when different things are coming onto the screen. We can just copy all those keyframes, and then at your next point that you want it to happen, we just want to bring it here. And it just gives it that effect that things are coming in and out of focus. And you can change the duration of these as well, just to make it super quick. And maybe one just at the end here. Last thing we're going to do now is just add in this texture layer that I've downloaded from Texture Labs. And all it is just this paper texture. And I'm just going to rotate that maybe 90 degrees, scale this up a good bit. We're just going to come on a bit, maybe here, Control, Shift and D just to split it. And then we can just split it again. And then maybe we want 4 different splits here. Can delete that end bit. And then just for each of these, I'm just gonna give this a new position and a new rotation, just to make them all a bit varied here. Great. And what we can do is just select these, right click, and let's pre-compose this, call this texture. And we can just duplicate this out a good few times. Select the bottom one, then click the top, and then we're gonna go keyframe assistant, and we're gonna sequence these layers. Now we can just right click these, pre-compose, and call it texture main. On this, we're gonna just give it a hard mix, and we're gonna drop this we're gonna drop the opacity down to something like 25. And that just really brings out this nice little texture throughout this. But let's just make sure that that's underneath our frame rate. And here is how everything is looking.
The way people watch your swing says more than just their interest. But in the end, their eyes don't matter. Only your scorecard does.
So, I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I know it's a bit of a longer one, but yeah, I think we went into a lot of detail with storyboarding and then just collecting everything. And yeah, there's a lot of different editing techniques in there as well. So please let me know if you enjoyed the video. As usual, all the project files for all of this will be in my Patreon. Yeah, thanks for watching. Cheers.